Well, next we have Dr. Sylvia Earle and Aaron Spencer. Dr. Earle is an explorer in residence at the National Geographic Society and also founder of the Sylvia Earle Alliance, Mission Blue, and of Deep Ocean Exploration and Research. And she's also the author of more than 200 publications and the leader of more than 100 expeditions underwater, 7,000 hours. She knows how to, do you call it pilot a submarine? What's the correct term? Drive a submarine? Whatever, you know it. Dr. Sylvia Earle. And also joining us is Aaron Spencer, National Geographic explorer who uses photography and writing to share stories of community-based invasive species management around the world, working primarily. Her focus is on innovative responses to invasive lionfish in the Western Atlantic and Caribbean. And she also launched the Invasive Species Initiative in 2014. It's a website that uses digital storytelling to share grassroots approaches to invasive species management. Thank you, ladies. Please join. Dr. Earle, I'm going to turn it over to you because I'm so fascinated. If you have a little presentation for us, actually.
Well, the topic here is exploration. And the idea that I really want to start with is, so we think of ages past as being the great era of exploring. And we have to look skyward, some believe, for the next great frontiers. And in my time, the idea of reaching for the stars, reaching for the moon, reaching for Mars has received a lot of support. And we have really invested greatly in what goes up. But we've been neglecting the other side of things. This planet, this blue part of the solar system, this blue part of the universe, going high in the sky has paid off handsomely. Neglecting the ocean is costing us dearly. I've had the great joy, and I hope you will too, of diving in. I've been leaping into the ocean with scuba, with submarines, living underwater since the middle of the 1950s. And it has given me a perspective that I hope all of you will gain by doing the same thing. I think no child should be left dry. No grown-up either. We live at a time when access to the sea, as never before, is possible. I have had a chance to speak to people even on the Jon Stewart program, a moment of Zen. I'm enjoying a Zen moment myself, but sharing the view from within the sea itself. And this is a time when we have that capacity to explore. I've had a chance to use some of the technologies that have been developed on my watch, in my time, in your time, the ability to walk on the ocean floor. At the same time, people have been walking up on the moon. But we hear a lot about what astronauts do. We hear less about what people do going into the ocean. But now, on our watch, we have the capacity to enjoy the use of little submarines. So simple to drive, even a scientist can do it, and I'm living proof. And to help get in the mix of things, to develop submersibles, as in the early days of aviation, a lot of private money went into doing that, as well as government support. But James Cameron, fellow National Geographic explorer in residence, used his own resources, as well as the National Geographic and funding from Rolex, to actually go to the deepest part of the ocean. It's that little green machine next to the big black sausage-shaped device that for the first time took 2 people to the deepest part of the ocean 7 miles down in 1960. To date, only 3 people have been to the deepest part of the ocean and come back. One-way trips, really easy. It's the round trips that count. So just last week, I was in a little submarine along with a fellow scientist, microbiologist, Samantha Joy. We were in the Gulf of Mexico looking at some of the deep systems of life that have only been witnessed in the last few decades. Really, the pace is picking up of ocean exploration despite the lack of support that is generally accorded for exploring the ocean. One of the things about the places that we were witnessing in the Gulf of Mexico, well known for the oil and gas reserves that are there, well known too for the life that occurs that people tend to like to eat, like shrimp and tuna and the like. But one thing that is not well appreciated is that in the Gulf of Mexico and in coastal areas around the world, including coastal areas in the Arctic, there are frozen deposits of methane. The last presentation really emphasized the problems that we are now facing with respect to a warming planet, ocean acidification, sea level rise, but also the release of gas hydrates that are frozen in the bottom of the sea, but less frozen all the time. As the ocean warms, these hydrates are being released into the atmosphere, which, just as when the tundra releases methane, so the methane released from the ocean is creating feedback mechanisms. Well, the largest amount of hydrocarbons on the planet, methane deposits in the sea. You don't see headlines about it presently, but there are headlines in scientific literature that really describe the nature of what's out there in the ocean and the risks that we now face as the planet continues to warm. You get up close and personal with the creatures who live around the highly saline lakes that we were exploring last week. There's salt mountains under the ocean in the Gulf of Mexico. They leak salt water that is heavier than the surrounding ocean, and they form, if you can believe it, I mean, it's hard to imagine, brine pools, lakes of highly saline water, where creatures such as mussels and other creatures thrive. They like it that way. We think of this as an extreme environment, but being on the stage here would be extreme to the creatures that live in the deep sea. So it wasn't that long ago that these deep communities of life were discovered. You know, in the late 1970s, in the process of geological studies revealing the nature of plate tectonics, how the continents move around, how the oceans form and reform, but also life in the deep sea, chemosynthesis that complements photosynthesis in terms of capturing carbon, driving the food webs that govern the way the world functions. Now we can understand and see things that were not known to us until recent decades. On your watch, mining of the deep sea is going to become increasingly important. We're investing many billions of dollars into the exploitation of the ocean, including developing machines, such as you see on this screen, for chewing up the ocean floor, just to gather the minerals that are there, but destroying the living assets in the process. We have to weigh on the balance sheet what's most important, short-term gain from minerals that we can use, or the long-term impact on our life support system. We're also mining the living creatures from the sea, clear-cutting the ocean of wildlife. That's happened on my watch, and yours as well. From the 1950s to the present time, on the order of 90% of many of the fish that we so love to munch on, tunas, swordfish, cod, you name them.
You mentioned that, Dr. Earle, and how important that is. These creatures of the sea, hugely important. I want to get Erin to weigh in as well here.
We're almost to the point where I'm going to turn it over to her.
Oh, sorry.
So if you can just give me a moment, that we are at a point where we are consuming the natural world at a rate faster than the natural world can recover, including burning through the fossil fuels that drive our civilization and make our lives hospitable and possible. But there are costs that we're just beginning to account for. There are oil spills, of course, but that's minor compared to the oil spill in the sky, if you will, with carbon dioxide and methane. But in addition, we have another kind of oil spill, and that's known as the plastics that are now in the ocean at a level that didn't occur when I came along. I come from the pre-Plasticozoic, but now we have to deal with this avalanche of petroleum-based products that are really engulfing the world. So what are the other problems? Warming the planet, sea level rise. We heard from the ambassador who preceded this talk about the consequences to you, to all of us, but to the ocean. About half the coral reefs have either disappeared or are in a state of sharp decline. More storms, bigger storms, problems for, of course, the creatures who live in the Arctic and the people who live there, but as was made clear, people all over the world and life all over the world. We should be listening to the fish, among other things. So this is the moment, our moment, to explore, to invest in the ocean, and to think about protecting life in the sea, as we have 100 years ago began protecting life on the land with systems of national parks. This is a centennial year, and the idea of blue parks to protect life in the sea. We stopped killing whales, and now there are actually more whales in the ocean than there were 50 years ago because we've stopped killing them. The question is, we only look at whales in the future as museum objects? Now we have to look at tuna and other creatures. Are we only going to see them as relics in a museum? Or will we be able to take actions? Will you be able to build on blue parks so that in the future there will be an opportunity?
I like, Dr. Earle, how you talked about how so much of the water is just unexplored. I want to bring in Erin as well.
Right.
Erin, tell us a little bit about, you look at species too that people just don't find and aren't aware of.
Yes, and so I want to say, first of all, thank you for letting me be here, and it's such an honor to share the stage with you, Sylvia. And if you don't mind, I'm going to get into that. I'd love to jump in quick with a story before we start, because it builds off of what Sylvia was talking about. Can I, if you don't mind?
Sylvia was worried about the clicker. I said, you drive submarines. It should be no problem for you.
Submarines are easy.
And I promise I will get back to your question, but because we are here, we have two generations of explorers. I want to start with a story, and this is actually a photo of me as an intern on my very first day of an internship here at National Geographic, and I was a sophomore in college and a communications major at the time. And I had an interest in marine science, and when I heard that Dr. Sylvia Earle was in this building, I actually camped out outside of her office waiting for her to come by, which now that I look back on it is pretty bold for an intern. But she did come by, had an impromptu meeting with me, and just treated me like it was the most important part of her day. And it seems like such a small interaction, but it really made a huge difference to me as an aspiring professional, and it actually was one of the factors that led me to change my major from communications to marine science. And that gets into what you asked about, is that I study specifically invasive species. After I changed my major, I applied for a National Geographic Young Explorers Grant, which targets people under 25, and this is the work I continue to do today. And if you're unfamiliar, invasive species are species that are non-native to an ecosystem and whose introduction causes harm or is likely to cause harm. And they cause $1.4 trillion in damage worldwide every year. And 42% of the species listed as threatened or endangered are at risk primarily due to invasive species here in the United States. But talking about exploration, I am trying to use exploration as a way to find solutions to huge environmental problems. And with invasive species, I look at how people around the world are taking the skills that they have at their disposal and applying it to management. And just to give an example, this is the invasive lionfish, which is found throughout the Western Atlantic, Caribbean, and the Gulf of Mexico. And it's originally from the Indo-Pacific region. And it's really wreaking havoc in this invaded range, partially because they are prolific breeders and they are voracious predators, kind of like the Hoover vacuums of the sea. And they're causing huge problems for native fish species that we have here. And locals in the invaded region are coming up with some pretty inventive ways of fighting back, and that includes serving them on restaurant menus instead of serving native fish like grouper and snapper. And then there's another really interesting initiative happening now in Belize, where they're actually training women in coastal fishing villages to make jewelry out of the fins and spines of lionfish. And this has a couple of different benefits. First, it raises the landing value for the fish, so now fishermen can also sell the fins and spines, which encourages them to continue to remove them instead of native fish species. And many of these women did not have a source of income before. They did not work outside the home. So now it's a women's empowerment issue, right? Like they're learning small business skills and being able to sell their product. So it's a fascinating way of approaching invasive species from not only an environmental angle, but also a social and an economic angle. I also recently traveled to Fiji. These stories are happening all over the world. And in Fiji, there was this small remote island in northern Fiji that was home to the Fijian crested iguana. And this species is native to Fiji. It is only found there. And because of the threat of invasive goats, this species was on the brink of extinction. In the 1980s, there were only about 300 of these left in the wild. And thanks to the efforts of a nonprofit there, they actually got the local village on this island to switch their local economy from goat farming to making handicrafts that are sold as part of the tourism industry. So now this island is 100% goat-free, and now you'll see tens of thousands of iguanas on that island, and they're really rebounding. So the focus of my research is to just be a storyteller and try and share these stories of innovative invasive species management, and also illustrate that anyone can be an explorer in their backyard and really make a difference in their local environment.
That's such a good point. I asked Dr. Earl backstage, I said, so what age did you start becoming an explorer? And I loved your answer. When I was born. So
like everybody else.
Yeah,
it's
when
what
I
kids
was born.
do.
I absolutely love that.
Out that way.
We've got some questions from the audience, and they're really good questions I want to ask you. So you are a real-life mermaid. Have you ever been called that before? A real-life mermaid. What's your most fascinating experience that you've ever had in the ocean? And what would you say, I'm going to also add, what do you think has been the most fascinating discovery in your generation?
Well, the best experience is the one yet to come. I'm off to go diving this weekend, so it's out there, down there somewhere. I think the most important discovery, actually, I think there are two that have happened since I've been around. And one of them is that our lives truly depend on the ocean. Go back to the 50s, and even in the minds of some people today, they think the ocean is too big to fail. That whatever we put into it, whatever we take out of it, no big problem. But now we know, now we understand that the ocean is in trouble. And maybe that's the biggest discovery. Maybe we'll be motivated to wise up and take action to protect the ocean, as if our lives depend on it, because now we know they do. And the National Geographic has a significant project called Pristine Seas, identifying critical areas and then doing what it takes to try to get governments to act, people to act, you to act. I've been spearheading something called Mission Blue, Hope Spots. They're whatever name you want to apply, we need to look at the ocean and understand that the most important thing that we extract from the ocean is not fish or lobsters or shrimp or clams or oil or gas. It's our existence, and we have to take it seriously.
Erin, you talked a little bit backstage. I was fascinated about the future. What gives you hope as someone who's on a different generation and has had the path set from somebody like Dr. Earl?
I think that one of the things that I get so excited to see is that when I have the opportunity to connect with other young explorers, and there's a great network here at National Geographic and throughout the country and the world, is that when people are coming up with expeditions now, there's always some amazing goal in the sense of conservation or human development. I mean, people are exploring not just to go to a new place, but to discover something that we can apply and make our world better. Whether that's conservation aspect, which is a lot of what I do. So there's always a real purpose, a bigger purpose, I think, to exploration. I also love, what gives me hope is interacting with people on social media a lot of times, because I have people asking me questions about invasive species from all over the place and every walk of life. And someone tweeting at me with a picture that's like, hey, I live in so-and-so and I found this lizard in my backyard. What's up with that? And I was like, I don't know, but I can connect you with someone who does. And that gives me hope that there's people from every walks of life who are approaching this issue, so.
I had to do a story for CBS This Morning on Monday about Finding Dory, the new movie, which is blockbuster blowout. And during the research, I found out that they were telling people, please, Dory is a blue tang fish. And they're telling people, please, do not buy blue tang fish because they're wild.
Right.
And they were saying apparently when Finding Nemo came out, Nemo is a clownfish, and lots of people went out and bought clownfishes. The next question here is fascinating. It says, what do you say to people who view animals and environmental or conservationism as secondary to issues that affect war and poverty? We sometimes think about it as not important.
They're totally connected.
How?
In every way imaginable. If we fail to take care of our life support system, I mean, if you like to breathe, you'll listen up. And more than that, you heard from the previous speaker about how climate affects everything and everyone, everywhere. It's an economic issue. It's a security issue. It's life itself. It's life itself. Now we know what we could not know until right about now. You are armed with power because every generation learns things, passes it along, learns new things, passes the knowledge along. So you have access to all preceding history. You're the beneficiaries of knowledge. And that should give you the perspective that we could not have before, that we are vulnerable to our own actions. We are the planet's big, #1 invasive species when it comes to transforming the natural systems. We have burned through the assets at what is clearly an unsustainable rate. But we know that it's happening, and that's power. We can exercise not only restraint and new technologies that are more efficient in terms of powering our economy, our civilization, but we can respect what we get from the natural systems that heretofore we've thought of as free. Fish are free until they're dead. Well, they're not really free. They're part of the living world, part of your life support system. You take your heart for granted, right? You've never seen your heart, most of you, probably, but you're sure glad it keeps on beating. And you should think of the ocean as the blue heart of the planet. Think of nature as that which keeps us alive, and we have to take care of it in ways that we did not have to think about until there were 7 going on 8 billion people.
I love that, the blue heart of the planet. So beautiful. I'm going to leave it on that note. Dr. Sylvia Earle and Erin Spencer as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.